Hello, I am the Script Doctor and welcome to the channel. As I mentioned in my Chapter 2 review, miniseries are intended to be tight stories with no room for filler. As a writer, a good way to avoid falling into a filler story is to make sure you have an active main character with a clear goal. Create drama in your story by bringing in obstacles to that goal for your hero to overcome. In this particular episode, our hero's goal is to hide. What sort of obstacles will prevent our hero from achieving his goal? We shall see as we check out Chapter 4, Sanctuary. The plot this week centers around the Mandalorian and the baby Minch hiding out on a backwater planet. He's hoping that due to the planet not being as technically advanced as others, it will make it harder for him to be found. On this world, there is a really small village that farms blue shrimp and lives a mostly very peaceful life, except when they get raided by these dog creatures. We see the tranquility at first, then the villagers see some warning signs that the raiders are on approach and immediately hide. A little girl that was trying to capture a frog earlier remains by the edge of the village for some reason. She doesn't get up and run like the other children, she just crouches there calling out to her mother. She's not injured or restrained, unless it is fear, but if these villagers are familiar enough with the raiders as they appear to be, given their desire to hide, then the child should be a little familiar with the situation enough to get her butt in gear and hide as well. But in this moment, she does not. Her mother runs head first through blaster fire to rescue her daughter. This is a great little character moment. We see how protective and brave she is going after her child. She also finds a clever way to hide themselves from the raiders as they pillage. In this brief scene alone, we get to learn a few important details of this mother character. We know she cares about her kid, we know that nothing will stop her from protecting her child, and we know that she's clever and pragmatic under tense situations based on how she hid herself and her daughter from the raiders. Compared to everyone else in the village that ran, this mother character is clearly an alpha presence. It is also done within a relatable and easy to grasp premise, a mother saving her child. When the Mandalorian and the baby land on the planet, instead of keeping the child by his side, our hero tells the baby to stay in the ship while he goes to find lodgings. Not the best idea considering that earlier the kid was flipping switches and playing with the controls. Thankfully, that baby is not staying put and joins the Mandalorian as he heads into town and finds a tavern. The Mandalorian notices a well-built and somewhat intimidating woman sitting alone at a table and suspects that she may be after them, having beaten them to the planet. He tips the waitress for information on the woman, which gives him more context. The warrior lady has been here for a while, which means that when she looks at the Mandalorian, she's likely to suspect he's after her instead of her being after him. The warrior lady dashes out of the tavern, and the Mandalorian goes to follow, asking the waitress to watch the baby. The warrior lady gets the drop on the Mandalorian, and the two have a pretty decent fight. For starters, this warrior lady is quite good at combat. She can take a hit and knows how to use her weight and size. I do have an issue with her punching the armor and not reacting, but punching the wooden tavern wall and shaking her hand from the pain. A little inconsistent. Another thing to realize is how good of a fighter the Mandalorian is in this scene. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. He's getting tossed around and his butt kicked half the time. Yes, but the fight ends in a draw. A fight that was started by an experienced warrior who had an advantage over our hero. If it was any other character, the warrior lady would have mopped the floor with them. She had the element of surprise and great skill. That's hard to come back from when you're on the receiving end. But the Mandalorian does. Imagine if it were Batman who got the drop on a criminal and the two fight only for it to end in a draw. You'd be really impressed and flabbergasted that this criminal could stand toe-to-toe with Batman. But you wouldn't expect it, and it would make you think about this criminal a little more. Who are they? Where were they trained? And how big of a character will they be in this Batman story? This is all hypothetical, of course, but I suspect you understand the framing I'm providing. Our warrior lady hero is really well trained and clever, but the world hasn't been bent around her to make her the best, nor has it bent around the Mandalorian character to make him the best. If the Mandalorian saw the lady warrior about to ambush him beforehand and then beat the crap out of her, that would be manipulation. But we get a surprise attack with a solid fight and an interesting conclusion. Also, I enjoyed what came later, which is something of a warrior's code of camaraderie. They fought, they came to an understanding, they're not friends, but they know they're not enemies. It's almost like they're on a path to earning each other's respect. The warrior lady is named Kara, and she was an ex-rebel trooper who has retired and is doing her own thing. The two agree that this planet is Kara's hiding place, and the Mandalorian and the baby will have to find another planet. As the Mandalorian prepares his ship for takeoff, two representatives from the village approach him seeking help. They want the Mandalorian to come to their village and fight off raiders. Our hero refuses until the villagers remark how they're helpless because they're in the middle of nowhere. This interests our hero, and he decides to share this information with Kara by tossing her some credits and having her join in on the mission. It's a cool offering of friendship by the Mandalorian. He and Kara want to hide, and this village has the means for them to do so in exchange for being protectors. So we have a Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven type story frame. If this were an hour-long show, I'd be okay with a sci-fi take on this type of story, but given that each episode, not including credits, is around 30 minutes or less, a story of this density will suffer. And it does. There is a love story subplot between the mother character and the Mandalorian which is so poorly developed, it's hard to grasp why there would be an attraction between the two. I'm not speaking physically, I mean just in general. She's interested in him because, I guess, of the uniform? He doesn't say much to her throughout the episode, so where is the attraction on a social or personality level? What we have here is the emotional aspect of the story being sacrificed for a plot element, the element being the village defending themselves against these dog orcs. The Mandalorian and Kara do a scout mission where they determine that the dog orcs have an AT-ST walker. The two think it is hopeless to defend the village and suggest that they relocate. The villagers refuse. They have a history here, and they paid Kara and the Mandalorian for protection. The villagers argue that they are willing to fight, and while Kara thinks it's hopeless, it is the Mandalorian that suggests training them. When asked if anyone knows how to shoot, the mother reluctantly and uncomfortably raises her hand. As she looks around to see that she's the only one with weapons experience, she grows more awkward and uncomfortable. The Mandalorian distributes his blasters to the townsfolk, and they begin to practice their aim. Kara teaches a group how to fight with sticks, and the villagers fortify their borders so they can trap and disable the walker. Our heroes sneak into the woods at night, ambush the dog orcs to get the attention of the walker, and scurry back to the village to stand their ground. The walker emerges from the forest, stopping short of the trap while the dog orcs charge their way into the village. The villagers pick them off, and even though Kara and the Mandalorian land a few good shots on the walker, it doesn't move forward. Kara has the idea to use herself as bait for the walker by borrowing the Mandalorian's pulse rifle and taking station in a pond by the trap. This is a silly idea. Why would an experienced soldier try and charge at a weapon of this type that they want to bring forward into a trap? Would it not be more strategically advantageous to fall back out of the AT-ST's range so it would step forward and become disabled? Have the villagers stage a retreat with Kara at the rear? The walker falls into the trap and the villagers double back to defend their land while the Mandalorian tosses a bomb, blowing up the AT-ST. But somehow, with the original plan of Kara in the pond, the walker does come forward into the trap, and the Mandalorian blows it up by throwing a bomb into its hatch. The dog orcs retreat, and the village is saved. The Mandalorian and Kara apparently stay in the village for several weeks, where the Mandalorian has decided to leave the baby Mensch behind as he goes off-world. The mother asks him to stay, trying to compel him to live a simpler life, but he refuses. A bounty hunter has managed to find the kid, and just before he's able to snipe it, Kara shoots him in the back. They find the tracking fob, and the Mandalorian realizes that he can't leave the child behind. The two pack up their things, say goodbye to the village and Kara, and that's the end of the episode. While this episode has some okay ideas, much like Chapter 2, it is mostly filler. One thing that Chapter 4 has over Chapter 2 is how this self-contained story introduces a choice to our hero. Chapter 2 was filler in that he needed to get off the planet to turn in his bounty, which is an unchanging objective from start to finish of that episode. Chapter 4 is laying low only for him to help a village and experience a lifestyle that could, but not necessarily will, tempt him away from his journey. He has made friendships on this planet, sees a good place for the child to be safe and grow up over the next 900 years, and he could leave the life of bounty hunting behind and settle down. Lots of aspects that are widely desirable to a mass audience. Sadly, this story doesn't explore the idea well enough for it to really resonate. This could have been done in a solid hour, but because it's a little over 30 minutes, the longest episode so far, moments and development are skipped over to get to the story beats before time runs out. Finally, to address a complaint I've seen pop up a few times on the internet, the Mandalorian handing Kara his rifle is not a violation of character. I've heard the argument that weapons are the Mandalorian's religion, so he wouldn't hand it over to Kara during battle. Yes, weapons are his religion, but they're not his precious. The Mandalorian handing over his rifle to help a new comrade fight off an enemy does not contradict his character. If the context between them were different, where Cara and the Mandalorian were not on friendly terms after their encounter, then there would be something to that argument. If the two were fighting constantly in the episode with Cara wanting the Mandalorian off-world or dead, but then they get attacked by those dog orcs, and the Mandalorian tosses his weapon to Cara, that would conflict with the character because they were enemies throughout the entire story until that moment when they're ambushed. But here we have a passage of time, not done well as it could have been in a full-hour episode, but we see them working together. Also, part of what makes an idea religious is to spread the word of that religious concept. If weapons are the Mandalorian's religion, then he is going to share that philosophy with those he thinks it will benefit. Priests share stories from the Bible in a house of worship. Missionaries travel across the world to spread the message of their God, and social media influencers take photos of crap nobody needs. Religion is not private. When it does become private and exclusive, it looks more like a cult. Since this series has established that the Mandalorians bring others into their clan not born from their world and does not yet appear to have any standards to reject outsiders from being a part of their society, they don't fall into a gatekeeping cult just yet. So for the moment, when it comes to this idea of the Mandalorian not handing a weapon over to an experienced soldier and new friend because it's his religion, well, that's conjecture because there are no facts to support such a claim. These two work together throughout their time in the village before that end fight. Cara teaching the villagers how to fight with sticks, the Mandalorian teaching the villagers how to shoot with his weapons. That is called teamwork. And even though they're not doing it side by side in both lessons, it is establishing a relationship between these two characters and a common goal for this episode, which is to fight back against the raiders and bring peace to the village. If there wasn't some respect earned between these characters, the Mandalorian wouldn't have given Cara the villagers credits and asked for help in fighting these raiders. In Chapter 2, the Jawas demand the Mandalorian abandon his weapons when they meet. They don't want to be killed like their brethren were earlier. He informs us that weapons are his religion, so we see an ideological conflict. He won't give them up to be defenseless. Being defenseless appears to be against the Mandalorian religion based on that scene. In Chapter 4, he offers to train the villagers to fight these raiders, essentially spreading the word of weapons, and hands out blasters to the villagers and teaches them how to aim and shoot. How is him giving weapons to villagers different than giving a weapon to Cara? Well, it isn't. The context of that scene is that the walker isn't walking into the trap and Cara has an idea to make that happen, which requires his gun. He hands it over willingly because in the context of this scene, both Cara and the Mandalorian need that walker to step into the trap. He does not lose a defensive advantage in doing so and offers to cover Cara during her attack. Had Cara grabbed the pulse rifle out of the Mandalorian's hands and charged the walker without communication, then your grievance would be somewhat valid. But that's not what happened. This was a story about the Mandalorian making another friend during his journey. Sadly, that story was not effectively played out in this episode. Had we seen the two have conflict with training the villagers, maybe an argument where Cara finds it hopeless but the Mandalorian wants to keep pushing to help these people, then we get some more development between these two characters. It would give us a better understanding of their relationship and could allow others to be more accepting of the handing off of the rifle. There was far more going on in this episode than what the runtime could allow. They made a lot of leaps over character development. They injected a love story that was lacking believability. They introduced an Imperial Walker owned by raiders and don't do anything with it other than have it attack. No follow-up questions as to why it's here and why it's only being used to torment a single village. They also presented the Walker as if it were a giant droid, automated with red eyes. No pilots inside. I looked very closely at the screen and could not see any pilots in this ATST. The characters also talk to the Walker as if it is anthropomorphic. Take the bait, you hunk of junk, as said by the Mandalorian. It's very odd. While this story is a standalone among the series, it still feels rather empty. While I like the idea of the Mandalorian finding another lifestyle that could tempt him away from bounty hunting, the fact that nothing is really done with it disappoints. We're halfway through the season and 2 episodes are filler. If they had skipped Chapter 2 and used that runtime to expand Chapter 4 into 2 episodes, this little side story would have room to expand on the character development and track a whole lot better than it did. With 4 more episodes left, the Mandalorian does not appear to have formed a plan of action regarding the child aside from running. And given that there is no other goal presented, I suspect we may get more episodes like this than the one we saw in Chapter 3. I hope I am wrong. I hope that the show turns around and gives us a solid goal, some great character development, and some action worthy of the large price tag that comes with the show. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.